Good afternoon, everyone. It's Josh here. So, I have some interesting views on life, as everybody who watches my videos know. Um, Perhaps a little bit off the beaten path, often, but I do tend to get into conflicts. I've found in the past, um, there's always one video that each of my subs totally disagrees with. And I think that's awesome. That's what I'm here for. That's what keeps me going. I get really, if people agree with me everything I say, then I know that I guess that means that I'm not really thinking outside the box, so to speak. But on the other hand, a lot of the people that watch my videos are people like me, so of course they're going to agree on a lot of points. So anyway, I try not to be an echo chamber. I try not to. Um, I try not to go to or listen to things that perpetuate my belief. Okay? My approach is to try to seek out anything that opposes what I believe with fervor. That's what's most important to me, because, in other words, I go every time I'm interested in something and I start believing something might be true, my first stop is the skeptic. I go to look at every skeptical outlook of it. And I'm going to say that at least 80% of the time, the skeptic's view is more reasonable and rational, and the skeptic is well thought out and organized. Whereas the person who's making the claim of something, obscene going on, something conspiratorial, whatever it may be, they tend to be more, how do I say, I don't know, hasty, arrogant, and they tend to scream and argue their points. In other words, a person who can calmly, collectively say, well, this is a reasonable approach to it, um, is the one that I'm most likely to listen to. Because the person that has to argue their point, it means that the evidence there is not strong enough to support their claim, often. I'm just going with the general. So anyway, on this note, I like to approach everything from both sides. And I think that's essential, and not enough people do it. In other words, I read the Bible, even though I'm opposed to Christianity. I study Judaism and Islam ideas, even though I'm opposed to both of those religions as well. And I've realized I've gone through stages where I thought, well, I shouldn't be opposed to this, or I shouldn't be opposed to that. I should just accept everyone. I've been making videos back to when, like last year, where I was saying that everyone should be tolerant of everyone, and that we should learn to accept everyone for who they are. Okay, I'm going to backtrack on that right now, because that's what I do when I find something I don't agree with anymore. I don't believe in a complete tolerance or acceptance of everyone and their beliefs. I'm starting to understand argument and reason, and why we do the things we do, and the conflicts in the human nature, and what makes us human. Now, philosophy of the history has been to try to say, why are we this way, and is it bad? In other words, some of humanity's maybe some of our desires and our attachments to certain things like materials, wealth, sex. Those things were considered such touchy subjects because we didn't know what to make of them. Christianity made it very clear that, well, they call it it's slave philosophy, or slave religion is what a lot of this was. When they say that the man with, the rich man has a harder time getting into heaven, or however the quote goes. Basically, a rich man will not enter heaven. Ridiculous notion. Completely ridiculous. It doesn't say anything about the man's moral value or integrity. If a person's poor and he does horrible things, then asks Jesus for forgiveness and then goes to heaven, and then the rich man could be, the ultimate, great person. He could do great things. He could start many great organizations and do fine things with the money. So, just saying a rich man doesn't get into heaven, or has a harder time getting into heaven, it just shows an attachment to the time when these things were created. So anyway, I start to look at things from many different angles. And I find that many of the Bible quotes and many of the other quotes have validity and meaning within humanity. But if you start to attach yourself to one or the other, how do I say this? If you start believing something too strongly, then you're losing touch. We're not intended to be creatures of decision that have finalities, because if we did, then we would have finalities. Now, who have final ideas, permanent, ingrained ideas of what everything means, they find conflict constantly in their lives because they have to reconcile the weird things that happen that oppose their view. In other words, religious folks often have entire websites and churches just dedicated to explaining the what's the word I'm looking for? Inconsistencies within the Bible or within the beliefs. Like, people of the church ask, well, I believe this and I was raised to believe this, but how can this be true? And why would God let this happen? Or whatever it may be. There are organizations just to reconcile and explain to people why. And my belief is that an ultimate truth wouldn't have to be explained by anyone. No man can interpret anything for another man. We are all completely ignorant, and to think otherwise is silly. So, why did I start this video talking about, looking at things from the other side? Because I've always been a fan of Socrates. I always liked some of his philosophies and whatnot, but there's always a few things that kind of bothered me. And I've been very reluctant to draw conclusions on how I really feel about this, but for those who don't know, Socrates basically was a loser. Okay? Now, in today's terms, he didn't want to work. He walked around philosophizing, talking about life. He'd go around the town bugging the people, saying, what is this about? What is this about? And one might say that's what people need to be woken up to the truth. But from another point of view, we are political animals. So everyone's going about their business the way that they see fit. And one guy comes along and he intrudes upon that. Now, there's a small group of people who say that the whole world needs to change and become like them. In other words, people who claim to be the awake ones, who think that 99% of the people are completely asleep. What I'm starting to realize is that those people who claim to be awake are usually asleep. They're asleep to the moment. They're asleep to the reason of being, which is just merely existence. And you can tell yourself as many stories as you want, but Socrates is a great figure in history. Nietzsche, Friedrich Nietzsche, that's who I've been listening to, basically a synopsis of his entire life. And then I just finished his book. I can't remember the name of the book. I'll have to look at both of these books. The book and the lectures were basically based on his philosophy on life. And why did I go to Friedrich Nietzsche? Because I've heard bad things about him, and that was it right there. I've heard bad things about him, and I've heard that he was a selfish person, that he hated women, that he was this and that. Perfect. That means that I have to read it, because I have to understand that point of view. So I did, and I found out that most of the shit people talk about him is due to the fact that he bashed religion. And that's usually the case when someone's really hated or ridiculed by the masses, is because they're opposed to religion, because the masses are religious. So Nietzsche basically, I guess you could call him a realist, but he, in the sense, was he was not so much of a negative person, but he did not like Socrates. He hated Socrates' view on life. And I think one of the clincher was probably the fact that when Socrates was old, he had to pay a small fine for his annoyances, and he refused to pay the fine and chose to suicide over that as principle. He drank the hemlock because he refused to pay a small fine, even though all of his disciples stood by and begged him not to. What kind of a fool gives up his life for a small fine? In other words, yes, you want your principles to stand for something. And the fact that he did that, he stands out in history. People still remember that. Socrates did that, and people still remember it and think about it. The question isn't whether or not it was remembered. The question is whether or not it's worth remembering, okay? And each of us have our selfish natures that says we need to preserve our own life. And this is a major dispute among a lot of people. A lot of people are willing to sacrifice for the greater good. The greater good is kind of a joke. Anybody who's looked into that sees that there is no cut and dry answer for anything. Anything in philosophy, there are no such thing as right and wrong. First off, and that's my view. But right and wrong are in the perceptions of the human, and that's based on your subjective experience. Also, the collective experience of everyone, but it's still based in human values. And values are a whole different subject I can't even go into, because values, what are values, you know? Oh, well, we have Christian values. What are Christian values? Are they different from other values? Are there people who have less values because they're not Christian? So, values are our way of saying, this is what's important to me. This is what I value. And it usually is more along the lines of integrity, honesty. But what of all these things? Let's take honesty, for example. How is honesty a good thing? It's good because it helps you to look like a more trustworthy person. So therefore, people are more willing to put trust into you. But is that a selfish notion, so you can get more? No, I don't think so. I think as a group, we have a collective notion of being honest because it helps everyone to live a better life, okay? Now, this is what I'm talking about with the greater good. The idea of a greater good is it can't be reconciled with anything we know. You can't say anything done. Let's say the example I always use is if a person was sitting next to you with a gun, and they were getting ready to kill 10 people, and you had a gun and you were able to finish the job. Just bypass all the details of whether or not you can fire a gun or would fire a gun or knew how to use it or who the person was or what the people were like. There's a person who's going to kill 10 innocent people, and you have a chance to kill him one way or another, even by lethal injection. Would you kill this person? And I've had this conversation with people, and they will say, no, I would not. No way. I can't kill another person. That's God's choice. This is how it always comes back to religion and why religion bothers me so much. You're taking mankind's efforts and putting them into God's hands. But a different side of it, a different view, is to see that if we are all part of God, then we are God's hands. You understand? This has got to be one of the things that really annoys me the most. It's like those parents that won't get their kids help because they just say, well, we're going to let God sort it out. Let God do it. God works through us, okay? This is why we're here. Whatever kind of God or being, if there is one, works through us. And we are this essence. We're not a plaything or a game or a little short life to determine how we're going to spend eternity. That's my view. I don't believe that. And I'm completely freely entitled to have that view. And this is kind of the whole thing, to come full circle with looking at both sides of a subject. You're able to admit to yourself that you were wrong about something, or that maybe you don't have 100% of the answer. And with that comes power. And there's nothing wrong with power. Power has a negative connotation. People attribute power to mean you are a official, or you're a leader, or you're someone who has a lot of money or clout. And power comes from within. Power is energy. If you have energy, you develop your own energy. Now, a person who truly has, I think, a valuable belief system, if they have one, is one that cannot be diminished in any way by another person's point of view. In other words, if I were to have a particular religion, It would only work for me if there was nothing another person could come and say that would make me question my faith. If I had to question my faith, then this is what faith is. Faith is belief in something with absolutely no evidence. Okay? Christians have to have faith, because without it, they're at the will of mankind to tell them which parts are true, what's right. But it's not Christians, and I don't mean to just not Christians. It's just a lot easier to say that. Muslims, the Jews, all religions in between. I'm more hardcore on the New Agers, because they're telling you all this bullshit about chakras and stuff, because they believe that they can heal you through means that are just as unproven as the ones in any religion. So it's not that I don't believe these things exist. I know that there are healers, and I know that faith healing works to an extent because people's intent. I just don't understand how it works, and nobody else understands how it works either. So the real healers are the silent ones, the one where, like, hey, I know a guy that lives up here and he does healing. They're not the people out there advertising as career healers. This is something that's done for the benefit of man, not the benefit of the individual. So all of these different things, all of these different ideas that we think we have about what's true and what's not, it becomes ludicrous when you look at it from both angles, from all angles. If you get out of your bubble for a minute, just get away from what you think is true and stop trying to reinforce it so hard, and just let yourself bounce around and float around. And I think that the number one fear of people of doing that is that they'll lose their ego will be damaged. Somebody will say, oh, you don't even know what you want. You're just out there just floating around, flim flam, blah, blah. Fuck them. It's not about them. It's about you. And just remembering that the search is the goal, okay? There's not going to be a moment where you find all the answers to life. It's something I truly believe cannot be attained. This answer that philosophy has been seeking for so long is a joke. It's elusive. It's just, and this is kind of the symbolism in the Bible of, like, when people say that if you saw God you would die because you can't comprehend him. That's the same kind of thing. You can't. What that might be reworded to say, after you die is the only way you'll be able to view that whole, because you're back into the whole matrix, the whole of it all. But none of us know how that works either. We've spent so many lives and so many dollars and so many wars trying to prove. I guess I should have turned my phone down. That's a Family Guy line. Have you ever put butter on a Pop-Tart? If you haven't, then I think you should. Well, that sure cut into my fucking... So, you owe it to yourself to look at every point of view, and you owe it to yourself to realize that there is no way to really comprehend the whole of what God is, or what this is all about. So let's stop trying to pretend that we know. Let's stop trying to pretend, and I'm not just talking about the ones who are ego tripping about saying, I know the answers. This also extends to the people who are saying that, that we shouldn't have an ego, or that we should be this way, or we should be that way, or we need to just love more, or we need to just accept everyone. What we need to do is stop telling people what we need to do. I'll end it there.